I think the stories of victims and perpetrators have a common arc, if you like, in that there's a before, I don't like to use light bulb moment, but you get what I mean, and then an aftermath. And what tends to happen in both cases is that there is an encounter, a life-changing encounter which shifts consciousness. Or it could be that after many years, a long time anyway, of just being stuck in a lifestyle or a thought process that isn't helpful to you and is actually doing you damage and others damage, you resolve to do things differently. So you sort of reach rock bottom. And in resolving to do things differently, you embrace compassion, empathy, and understanding of how others lead their lives. So, although the narratives themselves are very different, having said that, you know, at some level we're all victims, we're all perpetrators, and certainly when you go to prisons, the stories of abuse and the damage that's done to the men and women we've worked for in their childhoods is almost, you would say, 95% of the people we've worked with have had great harm done to them as well. I think stories are about breaking out of the cycle, and it involves a transformative change process. And the key moment in the story is almost what takes you to break out of that cycle, and that can be multiple reasons. So one of the ex-offenders that we work with, a guy called Peter Wolf, he had spent 18 years of his life in prison, on and off. When he was released, the last time he was in prison, which would have been 14 years ago now, he knew that if he ever went back into prison, it would be for murder. So his violence was escalating. For him, the change came about when he was just languishing in jail. Yet again, they all knew him. They said, "Oh, you're back, Peter." And they said, "Do you want to come and meet one of your victims?" It was a random restorative justice trial. He'd never heard of restorative justice. He thought, why not? It'll get me out of my cell. So they take him to this room at some point. He meets two of his victims, actually. And at first he's very guarded and defensive and sort of says, he expresses apology, but he doesn't mean it. It's insincere. And then one of his victims nearly breaks down and says, "You have no idea of what this has done to me and my family," and tells him in great detail what the burglary, it was a violent burglary, in that Peter had actually beaten up this guy, and tells him about he feared going back through his door after that. He couldn't sleep at night. He was, you know, probably taking tranquilizers. His daughter was afraid to come home. It humanized the violence. It changed everything for Peter. And the really interesting thing about his story is, I think, that he now has actually developed a friendship with his victim, which is very unusual. But he says, at that time, in all those years, I didn't know how to feel. I didn't know what feelings were. I had no vocabulary for feelings. And he's had to learn to feel. And sometimes I think when we tend to compare ourselves to other people, but most people wouldn't know quite what it feels like not to feel. Therefore, the man that he attacked began to really understand Peter's journey. And they become like equals in a way. And it's no longer victim and perpetrator. It's two human beings just trying to do their best and sharing a story.